do something for me.
He calls himself the king.
Historians recently discovered that Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who ordered Jesus' execution, might have written a letter containing information about Jesus before his death. This letter could potentially change our understanding of Jesus' life. We know Pilate played a key role in Jesus' trial and crucifixion. However, this newfound letter suggests he may have withheld some information about Jesus until the very end. Historians are now trying to figure out what Pilate might have revealed and what impact it might have on our understanding of Jesus. So, could there have been some unknown connection between the two men? And what has this letter revealed? Join us as we delve into the shocking details of Pontius Pilate's letter. Pontius Pilate, more than just the man who condemned Jesus. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea from roughly 26 to 37 AD, is a name forever etched in history. While most famously known for ordering Jesus' crucifixion, his life and legacy hold surprising complexities. Pilate played a pivotal role in the trial and execution of Jesus, documented in the Christian Gospels. These accounts portray him as hesitant to condemn Jesus, struggling with the pressure from the Jewish authorities. This portrayal has significant meaning in Christianity, with Pilate's name included in both the Apostles' and Nicene creeds. Interestingly, Ethiopian Christian tradition offers a contrasting view. There, it's believed that Pilate eventually converted to Christianity, becoming a martyr and a saint. This belief extends to the Coptic Church, which celebrates him with a feast day. Before Pilate's involvement, Jesus faced a biased trial orchestrated by Caiaphas, the high priest. This trial, held before religious leaders and elders, ultimately led to Jesus being brought before Pilate for his final judgment. One of Jesus' disciples, Peter, even followed from a distance, adding another layer to this dramatic event. Jesus before the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin, a powerful Jewish council of 70 members, was determined to bring Jesus down. This group, primarily composed of Sadducees, Pharisees, and priests, along with their leader, the high priest Caiaphas, desperately sought any evidence to condemn Jesus to death. However, despite their relentless efforts, they couldn't find any legitimate charges against him. Faced with a lack of evidence, two individuals came forward with a distorted claim. They accused Jesus of threatening to destroy the temple, a revered religious site. This accusation stemmed from a previous statement Jesus made about rebuilding the temple in 3 days. It's likely Jesus was speaking metaphorically, referring to his own body as the temple that would be resurrected after 3 days. However, this nuance was lost on his accusers. The tension escalated when Caiaphas directly challenged Jesus, demanding to know if he claimed to be the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus' response was a clear affirmation, hinting at his divine nature and future glory. He prophesied that they would see him seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven, Matthew 26:64. This statement ignited outrage in Caiaphas. Blasphemy, according to Jewish belief, meant speaking or acting in a way that disrespected God. Jesus' claim of being God's son was seen as a blatant insult. The Sanhedrin, seizing this opportunity, declared Jesus guilty of blasphemy. The Sanhedrin's desire to condemn Jesus stemmed from a combination of factors. They felt threatened by Jesus' teachings and actions. He openly challenged their authority, calling them out for hypocrisy. Additionally, his association with sinners, such as tax collectors and prostitutes, went against their moral code. Furthermore, Jesus' disregard for the Sabbath laws by performing healings on that day further fueled their disapproval. The most significant point of contention, however, was Jesus' claims about himself. The Sanhedrin vehemently rejected the idea of Jesus being the Son of God or the prophesied Messiah. Despite finding Jesus guilty, the Sanhedrin lacked the authority to carry out the death penalty at that time. To secure Jesus' execution, they needed the approval of the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. The Sanhedrin, now forced to navigate the political landscape, fabricated new accusations. They shifted their focus, accusing Jesus of political crimes, corrupting the people and urging them to rebel against Roman rule. They further claimed he declared himself king, a direct challenge to the authority of Caesar. Interestingly, these accusations were likely a fabrication, as Jesus never explicitly advocated for tax evasion or rebellion. Jesus between Pilate and Herod. Pontius Pilate eyed Jesus with a mixture of curiosity and political calculation. He directly questioned Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" John 18:33. While acknowledging the statement, Jesus' response was subtle. He knew a direct answer wouldn't serve him well. Unlike the Sanhedrin, Pilate wasn't interested in theological debates. His concern lay with the potential political unrest Jesus might stir. Finding no legitimate grounds for crucifixion under Roman law, Pilate declared Jesus innocent. However, the pressure from the chief priests and the angry crowd remained. Seeking a way out of the escalating situation, Pilate inquired about Jesus' origin. Upon learning Jesus hailed from Galilee, Pilate saw an opportunity. Herod Antipas, son of Herod the Great, held authority over Galilee at that time. Pilate, aware of Herod's jurisdiction, cleverly shifted responsibility. He sent Jesus to Herod Antipas, hoping he could deal with the issue. Herod Antipas held a lesser status compared to his father and brother, who previously ruled Jerusalem. His presence in Jerusalem might have been a political move designed to bolster his image. The Bible tells us Herod was actually excited to meet Jesus, having heard about his miracles. However, Jesus remained silent during their encounter, frustrating Herod's expectations. Jesus' silence in the face of Herod's curiosity adds a layer of mystery to the narrative. Meanwhile, the Jewish leaders continued to relentlessly press their accusations. The whole situation was turning into a complex political game, with Jesus caught in the middle. Herod's spy network. Herod Antipas was no stranger to Jesus. His vast network of spies kept him informed about the man who was stirring the Galilee region. Herod had a troubled past, particularly concerning John the Baptist. John's public denouncement of Herod's marriage to Herodias, his brother's wife, created a moral and political quagmire. Despite lacking strong moral principles himself, Herod was wary of the public disapproval surrounding the marriage. However, unlike what some Pharisees had warned Jesus, Herod's interest in Jesus wasn't malicious. Purely driven by curiosity about Jesus' fame and reported miracles, Herod craved a spectacle. He envisioned a powerful prophet performing wonders at his command. But Jesus, recognizing Herod's shallow interest and disregard for the true meaning of his message, remained silent during their encounter. This unexpected silence ignited a spark of resentment in Herod. Feeling disrespected and his curiosity thwarted, his curiosity morphed into spite. To assert his dominance and belittle Jesus, Herod and his men subjected him to a cruel mockery. They dressed Jesus in ostentatious clothing, a mocking coronation for a man they didn't consider a true king. This act wasn't just about amusement. It was a public display of Herod's power, a way to diminish Jesus and solidify his own authority, especially in the face of a potential threat. The message was clear. Herod, a puppet king under Roman rule, still held sway in his own territory. And Jesus, despite his growing influence, posed no challenge. The relationship between Herod and Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, was a complex one. Despite initial tensions, their paths unexpectedly converged due to Jesus. Pilate, facing relentless pressure from the Jewish leaders and fearing unrest during the volatile Passover season, sought a way out. He knew the accusations against Jesus were politically motivated, but the angry crowds outside his palace demanded action. Even though he found no fault in Jesus, the volatile situation in Jerusalem forced him to prioritize political expediency over justice. This resulted in him allowing Jesus to be mistreated despite his innocence. Interestingly, a curious tradition existed in Roman Judea during Passover. The governor held the power to pardon one prisoner chosen by the people. This custom, known as the trial of faith, presented Pilate with a difficult choice. He had two prisoners before him: Jesus, the man deemed a threat by the Jewish leaders, and Barabbas, a known rebel. The crowd, swayed by the chief priests and elders, would ultimately decide whose fate would be sealed. Jesus, Barabbas, and Pilate's impossible choice. The fate of Jesus hung precariously in the balance as Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, surveyed the scene. Two figures stood before him: Jesus, a charismatic preacher revered by some as the Messiah, and Barabbas, a notorious criminal known for violent acts of rebellion. The air crackled with tension. Pilate, a shrewd politician, recognized a current of jealousy coursing through the Jewish leaders who had brought Jesus to him. These leaders, threatened by Jesus' growing influence, sought his elimination under the guise of a legal proceeding. Adding to the complexity of the situation, Pilate's wife had a disturbing dream about Jesus, a powerful premonition of his innocence. This dream weighed heavily on Pilate's conscience. He knew a fair verdict would require releasing Jesus, but a crucial question remained. Would the crowd, swayed by the pronouncements of the chief priests and elders, accept such a decision? Pilate gambled, turning to the crowd and posing a seemingly simple question: who do you want me to release, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah? Matthew 27:17. This question laid bare the stark contrast between the two men. Would they choose the violent rebel or the peaceful preacher? Pilate's hope for a just outcome quickly evaporated. The chief priests and elders, driven by a potent mix of fear and ambition, had meticulously orchestrated the situation. They whipped the crowd into a frenzy, manipulating them to demand the release of Barabbas and the condemnation of Jesus. Their goal wasn't simply to eliminate a rival. It was about preserving their own authority and religious standing. The scene descended into chaos. The crowd, echoing the demands of their leaders, roared for Barabbas' freedom and Jesus' crucifixion. This turn of events was baffling. Why would the crowd clamor for the release of a violent criminal and demand the death of a man they had heard preach messages of love and forgiveness? Pilate, caught in this political maelstrom, reiterated Jesus' innocence. He found no crime worthy of the brutal punishment of crucifixion. He even proposed a compromise, suggesting a lesser penalty for Jesus. But the mob's fury only intensified. Faced with the relentless calls for Jesus' execution, Pilate buckled under the pressure. In a symbolic gesture of washing his hands, he attempted to absolve himself of any responsibility for Jesus' fate. This act, however, was a mere charade. He had surrendered to the will of the crowd, allowing them to decide the fate of a man he believed to be blameless. The narrative then shifts to the release of Barabbas and the surrender of Jesus to the crowd for his execution. Yet a critical question remains unanswered. Was Jesus truly guilty of the accusations leveled against him by the Jewish leaders? The Sabbath dilemma: healing or rule-breaking. The holy day of Sabbath, meant for rest and prayer, became a battleground for Jesus. The Pharisees and religious authorities constantly scrutinized his actions, waiting for him to stumble and violate their strict interpretations of Sabbath laws. They'd often use trick questions like, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" hoping to trap him. Mark 3:2. Some gospel accounts, like those in Mark and Luke, depict Jesus engaging in thoughtful discussions about Sabbath observance. These discussions highlighted the ongoing debates surrounding the interpretation of specific Sabbath rules. However, the Gospel of Matthew portrays Jesus using a powerful parable to simplify the message. Jesus didn't offer a dry, legalistic response. Instead, he painted a vivid scene. He described a sheep falling into a pit on the Sabbath, prompting his listeners to imagine themselves in that situation. Would they help the helpless animal despite the Sabbath restrictions? The answer, Jesus implied, was self-evident. Helping others takes precedence over rigid adherence to rules. The core of observing the Sabbath wasn't about following a checklist of regulations. It was about compassion and kindness. Further emphasizing his point, Jesus performed a remarkable act of healing. He restored strength and function to a man's withered hand. This display of compassion should have been met with praise. However, the religious leaders, threatened by Jesus' growing influence and disregard for their interpretations, became enraged. Their animosity deepened because Jesus challenged their authority and defied their rigid interpretations of the Sabbath. This tension escalated further when the Pharisees, a powerful Jewish sect, formed an unlikely alliance with the Herodians, supporters of the Roman-appointed King Herod. This unusual partnership had a singular goal: to silence and discredit Jesus. While many accounts mention healings on the Sabbath sparking conflict, the story in Luke presents a different perspective. Here, Jesus heals someone in the privacy of a home, avoiding the public spectacle that often attracted controversy. This incident raises a question. Why did Jesus choose to heal on the Sabbath, even in a private setting, knowing the potential disapproval? Jesus' healings on the Sabbath weren't a rebellion against God's law. They challenged a human interpretation of it. As stated in Matthew 5:17, Jesus' mission wasn't to abolish the law, but to fulfill its true purpose. His primary motivation for healing on the Sabbath was simple. People were suffering, and they needed help. These acts of healing also exposed a deep hypocrisy within the religious establishment, particularly the Pharisees. Jesus aimed to teach them and others that love and compassion should always come first, even if it meant breaking man-made rules. On several occasions, Jesus faced opposition when his healings ignited debates. He cleverly pointed out how the Jews, in their agricultural society, would tend to their animals on the Sabbath, something accepted by the Pharisees. He highlighted the contradiction. They were willing to work for the sake of animals, yet hesitant to extend that same compassion to a human being in need. Luke 13:15. Jesus further exposed their double standard by questioning their refusal to help a sick woman, a daughter of Abraham. Luke 13:16. Jesus' actions also challenged the religious leaders' rigid understanding of Sabbath laws. He posed a powerful question: is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it? Mark 3:4. This question forced the leaders to confront the very essence of morality and compassion. Their silence spoke volumes, revealing their inability or unwillingness to acknowledge the rightness of doing good, even on a day of rest. The Sabbath, as intended by God, was a day of rest and restoration, not merely an absence of activity. It was a time to step away from the daily grind, to reflect on one's relationship with God, and to connect with loved ones. However, the Pharisees, with their meticulous interpretations, had transformed the Sabbath into a day burdened by a multitude of rules. Their focus had shifted from the spirit of the law to the letter, missing the true essence of what the Sabbath represented. Jesus' healing served as a powerful demonstration. He showed everyone that prioritizing kindness and preserving life transcended any man-made Sabbath regulations. Conversely, using Sabbath rules as an excuse for inaction or cruelty was a distortion of God's true law. Ultimately, Jesus healed on the Sabbath to remind people of the day's true purpose. The Sabbath wasn't just about praising God. It was also meant to be a day of service and support for others, as stated in Mark 2:27. Jesus' actions sparked a vital conversation about the true meaning of the Sabbath. He challenged people to move beyond a rigid legalistic framework and embrace the Sabbath's core principles: rest, reflection, and service. The Sabbath was a gift, a day set aside for spiritual renewal and acts of compassion. By prioritizing these elements, Jesus argued, one could truly fulfill the spirit of the law. Rethinking religious authority. The Sabbath was intended as a gift, a time for people to recharge after a busy week. It wasn't just about physical rest, it was a chance to shift focus from daily tasks to spiritual reflection and connecting with God. When Jesus healed on the Sabbath, he wasn't breaking the law, he was fulfilling its true spirit, a day dedicated to helping others. This story reminds us of the dangers of clinging too tightly to our own interpretations, even of religious beliefs. It's important to constantly reevaluate our understanding and ensure it aligns with the core principles of our faith. Jesus often faced accusations from those who couldn't grasp the deeper meaning behind his words and actions. The Romans, for example, struggled to understand his statement about destroying and rebuilding the temple in 3 days, Mark 15:29. This could be interpreted as blasphemy, a threat to the sacred temple. However, Jesus was referring to his own death and resurrection, a concept beyond Roman comprehension. Jesus' disciples also held mistaken beliefs. They envisioned him as a conquering Messiah who would establish an earthly kingdom, overthrowing the Roman rule, John 6:15. Jesus, however, challenged this perception. He explained that his path to kingship wasn't through violence but through sacrifice. Another example of Jesus' symbolic actions was his willingness to dine with sinners, Luke 5:30. Sharing a meal with tax collectors and outcasts was a deliberate act. It symbolized his message of redemption and God's all-encompassing love. Jesus wasn't there for the self-righteous. He came to offer forgiveness and hope to those who recognize their need for spiritual renewal. Matthew, a former tax collector himself, understood this message. He invited his former associates, now drawn to Jesus' teachings, to a meal where they could meet the teacher. The religious elite, however, disapproved of Jesus' association with these outcasts. Jesus remained undeterred, driven by his mission to seek and save the lost. In Jesus' time, religious leaders like the Pharisees commanded immense respect. They were seen as paragons of righteousness, meticulously following religious laws and traditions. However, Jesus challenged their rigid interpretations and self-serving practices. Jesus and the outcasts. The religious leaders of Jesus' time, particularly the Pharisees, prided themselves on following strict religious laws. However, this often translated into social elitism. They meticulously followed rituals and pronouncements, creating a clear distinction between themselves and anyone they deemed a sinner. This social exclusion was particularly harsh towards tax collectors, who were not only seen as collaborators with the despised Roman occupiers, but also notorious for their corrupt practices. Jesus, however, took a radically different approach. He deliberately chose to associate with these outcasts, defying social norms and religious expectations. He shared meals with tax collectors and sinners, a powerful act that emphasized his message of forgiveness and God's all-encompassing love. Jesus wasn't there for the self-righteous. He came to offer hope and a chance at redemption to those who recognized their need for spiritual renewal. As Jesus' ministry grew, so did his appeal to the marginalized. He offered them a sense of belonging and a future they had never dared to imagine. Society had ostracized them, labeling them as unworthy and beyond redemption. But Jesus saw their humanity, their potential for good, and the possibility for spiritual transformation. When Matthew, a former tax collector himself, became a close follower, Jesus naturally spent more time with those on the fringes of society. As Mark 2:17 states, Jesus came not for the healthy, but for the sick. Jesus knew that to reach those who felt lost and ostracized, he needed to connect with them on a human level, to show them that they were not beyond God's love and grace. During a feast at Matthew's house, Jesus challenged the Pharisees' rigid, self-serving interpretations of righteousness. By sharing a meal with sinners, he demonstrated that he cared more about the condition of a person's heart than their social standing. The Pharisees judged others based on their past actions, perpetuating a cycle of exclusion. Jesus, however, saw their potential for growth, their capacity for change. He believed that true righteousness wasn't about outward appearances or strict adherence to rituals. It was about love, compassion, and a willingness to see the good in everyone. Jesus' compassion extended far beyond this one encounter. Throughout his ministry, he consistently reached out to those in need, defying societal expectations and religious boundaries. He surprised his disciples by engaging in conversation with a Samaritan woman, considered outcast by Jews, forgave a woman caught in adultery, and helped a Syrophoenician woman whose ethnicity made her an outsider. He even touched a leper, a social taboo that reinforced their isolation, and visited the home of Zacchaeus, a notorious tax collector, demonstrating his willingness to embrace the marginalized and bridge the gap between social classes. Time and again, Jesus showed compassion for the ostracized and expressed love for those deemed unworthy. His actions embodied his core belief, looking beyond cultural barriers and recognizing the inherent worth of every human being. He transcended the limitations of custom and tradition, offering a radical message of love and acceptance for all. Jesus' ministry wasn't just about religious reform. It was about a social revolution, a call to embrace the outcast, the downtrodden, and the forgotten. The radical embrace, Jesus and the outcasts. Many believe Jesus came to condemn sinners, to uphold society's rigid rules and point fingers at those who strayed. But the core of Jesus' message was far more radical. It was a message of redemption and all-encompassing love. John 3:17 beautifully captures this essence. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Jesus wasn't concerned with social status or past mistakes. He came to offer a path to salvation, a chance for everyone to experience God's love and grace. Jesus embodied this message through his actions. He wasn't afraid to associate with those ostracized by society, the sinners deemed unworthy. He spent time with them, shared meals, and treated them with kindness and understanding. This radical inclusivity had a profound impact. Those labeled as outcasts saw Jesus for who he truly was, a compassionate man radiating God's love, capable of performing extraordinary miracles. His genuine care and acceptance stood in stark contrast to the harsh judgments they faced daily. Unconcerned with social norms, Jesus resembled a caring shepherd, relentlessly seeking those who needed help. No matter their past or social standing, Jesus actively reached out. He understood that true transformation begins with love and acceptance, not condemnation. When Matthew, a former tax collector, threw a party, Jesus readily joined in. It was an opportunity to share God's love with those who most needed to hear it. This willingness to associate with the ostracized drew criticism from the religious elite, the Pharisees. They rigidly followed a set of rules, believing people had to earn acceptance through good deeds. Jesus, however, offered unconditional love, welcoming everyone, regardless of their past. One powerful example of Jesus' radical love is the story of the woman caught in adultery, John 8:1-11. Imagine a serene scene, Jesus teaching in the temple, perhaps reflecting on his recent time of prayer and contemplation on the Mount of Olives. Suddenly, a group of scribes and Pharisees burst in, disrupting the peaceful atmosphere. They dragged a woman before him, accusing her of adultery, a crime punishable by stoning. Their voices echoed through the temple as they demanded Jesus uphold the law of Moses. This was a trap. If Jesus condemned her, he'd be seen as harsh and unforgiving. But if he contradicted the law, they could accuse him of blasphemy. Instead, Jesus responded with remarkable calmness, refusing to be drawn into their legalistic game. Jesus, however, wouldn't be drawn into their legalistic game. He didn't engage in a heated debate or rush to judgment. Instead, in a simple yet profound gesture, he knelt on the dusty floor and began drawing in the sand. This unexpected act captured the attention of everyone present. The tension in the air thickened as they waited in silence, wondering how this unconventional teacher would respond. Jesus' response was both ingenious and disarming. He calmly stated, "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." John 8:7. His words hung heavy in the air. This simple challenge had a profound effect. The crowd began to disperse, the accusatory voices replaced by the shuffling of departing feet. One by one, those eager to condemn the woman drifted away, their own consciences awakened to the imperfection within them. When the dust settled, Jesus stood alone with the woman. He gently asked her, "Has no one condemned you?" When she replied in the negative, Jesus offered words of grace and a renewed chance. "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." John 8:11. This encounter reveals much about Jesus' character. The scribes and Pharisees were attempting to exploit a legal loophole to discredit him. If he condemned the woman, they could brand him heartless and unforgiving. But if he advocated for her freedom, they could accuse him of defying the law. Theirs was a test designed to trap Jesus, but his wisdom and compassion shone through. The crowd's initial bloodlust reflects the harsh realities of ancient justice systems, where punishment was often swift and unforgiving. Jesus' response challenged this notion. He not only demonstrated his belief in forgiveness and redemption, but also exposed the hypocrisy of those who readily judged others while overlooking their own flaws. This event further showcases Jesus' ability to navigate complex situations. By refusing to endorse the woman's actions or her punishment, he skillfully avoided the traps set by both religious law and Roman authority. His response transcended legalistic rigidity, emphasizing the importance of mercy and understanding in human interactions. The motives of the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees and scribes, are also worth considering. While they wielded significant religious authority, their actions here raise questions about their true intentions. Some historians believe they were attempting to discredit Jesus or test his adherence to the law, not seeking a genuine solution for the woman's situation. The drama of the encounter between Jesus and the woman accused of adultery unfolds in a particularly intriguing setting, the temple area in Jerusalem. This wasn't just any part of the temple. It likely occurred in the court of the Gentiles, a bustling space where people from various backgrounds gathered. This diverse audience, both supporters and doubters, adds a layer of tension to the scene as Jesus faces scrutiny in a very public forum. Jesus' response further heightens the drama. Instead of immediately engaging his accusers, he stoops down and begins writing in the dust. Scholars continue to debate the exact meaning of this action. Some believe it references Old Testament passages related to judgment and forgiveness, subtly reminding everyone of God's emphasis on both justice and mercy. This silent act adds another layer to the story, prompting reflection on the true meaning of righteous judgment. The story of Jesus extends beyond this encounter. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, plays a pivotal role in the ultimate outcome. Despite finding no fault in Jesus, Pilate ultimately condemns him to death. This decision underscores the simmering political tension between the Roman authorities and the Jewish religious leaders. Pilate's reluctance to intervene reveals the complex power dynamics at play, highlighting how political expediency often trumps justice in the ancient world. The manner of Jesus' execution, crucifixion, further emphasizes the gravity of the situation. This brutal method of punishment, reserved for the worst criminals, was designed to inflict excruciating pain and humiliation. Jesus' willingness to endure such a fate speaks volumes about the depth of his sacrifice and his unwavering commitment to his mission. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments section. Thanks for watching, friends. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and watch another of our interesting videos before you leave.